Right, entry level 911, top speed 182 miles an hour, 0 to 60, 4.2 seconds and 385 horsepower. It costs £84,000, but this man says you shouldn't buy one. Because this man is famous for saying if it goes up in value, buy it. If it goes down in value, lease it. And if he were alive today, oh yes, he'd use Leasing.com. And with that out of the way, let's begin. The first thing you might not know is that I have never driven a 911 on a road. This is an experience of a lifetime for me. I'm going to try and bring you in a little bit if I can because, well, I'm quite amazed. Wow. Now I was going to say that this car is something that you have to push to get the best out of it because it is just the base model, and you do a bit, but there's quite a lot of this that is a bit too quick for the road. You run out of road in one of these quite quickly. Here's a corner. Here's a corner that actually isn't a corner because there's no such thing as corners in a 911. They just become straight lines. Oh, I get it. I get it now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11. That's an 11, the brake, right? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, sat up all night working that out. I'm even going to go as far as to say there's actually a little bit of fear here onto the brake. Nice sharp bend here. And can I see around the corner? Yes, fine. Yeah, there's a little bit of terror because you're so in touch with the road. It doesn't really feel like there's a car underneath you, and every single undulation in the road you feel, not in a bad way, in a connected way. Wow, sharp bend, turn in a little bit. You don't even really need to slow down. Probably do. This reinvents driving. This is phenomenally good. Oh my God, stomach muscles are engaged. If you really did wonder whether the base model is enough, the answer to that is very yes. The chassis is pretty much the same as the last one. The gearbox is new 8-speed gearbox. Adaptive dampers is now standard, and of course you've got these new active cooling vents which take air in to obviously cool the engine. And at the back the spoiler now has 3 modes, including an eco mode. And what's actually clever about this whole cooling system is that the air that goes through here passes through the car, and then the spoiler at the back decides how much air to let out through an additional duct. The correct pronunciation of this car is actually Porsche, not Porsche, even though I might refer to either in this video. That's because I feel a bit unusual saying Porsche, but the proper pronunciation is Porsche. The reason this is called a 911 is actually because of Peugeot. Originally this car was going to be called a 901, but Peugeot, they made a call and they rang them up and they said, excuse me, we have a trademark for the configuration of naming a car digit 0 digit, like Peugeot 205. So they had to back down. According to the website 911uk.com, what would you say the average miles of a 911 driver would be? Well, I'll tell you, 6,200 miles a year, which is 16 miles a day. How can anyone who's got one of these only do that? Here is the new infotainment system, which you get in the Panamera, in fact, actually across the whole range, but when you press this button, you can actually have a selection of your own widgets. So you can actually change all of these to what your most frequently used ones are. That's the map, which I think is very nice. And of course, you've got this down here, which is essentially like a little iDrive. So this will move around the options and help you input your navigation and so on. Over here, most of this, in fact, all of this is digital except the RPM. They've thought about that because I don't think any of these Porsche drivers or Porsche drivers are going to love a digital RPM counter, but that's good. Over here, I like this feature too because you can press this button and you can put the map there, which is a very nice little touch. This new 911 has acoustic glass. Now this has two functions. The first is noise, the second is for weight saving. This version weighs about 1,500 kilograms, which is about as much as a Golf R, although this is faster, lower, wider and a lot better. But it gives you an idea of how much it weighs in its rear wheel drive form, in its basic form. And of course we all know how the rear wheel drive can sometimes react in the wet. But Porsche have thought of that. They've added a thing called wet mode, which is this button here. And it automatically warns you when it's raining. The sensors under the front wheels. And it says, it's raining, do you want to engage wet mode? And if you're scared like me, you say yes. Despite this car's popularity, it was once nearly shelved. In fact, it was nearly replaced with this. This is the 928. If you remember, these were around in the 90s, and it was always the car, when it was parked in your road, you'd always go and have a look in the back window. Nothing in there. It's just a window that's a boot thing, right? Anyway, as a result of complete customer outrage, they decided to shelve the 928 and it disappeared, and they kept this. Speaking of the 90s, do you remember these headlights? They're sort of like a teardrop, and if you also remember, they had them on the 911 and on the Boxster. This was a problem for 911 owners because they didn't want the same headlights as someone with a cheaper car. I mean, that's quite snobby. Let's be honest, a Porsche is a Porsche. It doesn't really matter which one you've got. But anyway, there was uproar, they changed it, and that's why we see the lights as they are today. The most expensive 911 in the UK is a staggering £1,395,000. It's a 1993 964, and here is a picture of it. Here's a comments quiz. This is the interior. My question, is this standard? In the game Cyberpunk 2077, there is a classic 911 from 1976 inside the game, and in order to drive it around the city and enjoy yourself, you have to do 4 different missions in a particular order, which is extremely difficult. I've tried it, then I had to go on YouTube and look it up. There's also some very rude bits in that game, but that's another story. On to speed now. Believe it or not, the 911 is still one of the fastest cars in the world. In fact, the Nürburgring record, that's a Porsche. It's like a posh Porsche. And then you've got the fifth, I think the fifth fastest is still a 911. So even though we've got electric cars and supercars and technology have moved on, the 911 is still quick. And have a look at this, the 911 Turbo S. How fast do you think that goes? 0 to 30. 0.9 seconds. That's 100 in 5.3 seconds. 100. And the final thing you might not know about the 911 is that recently there was a survey of 4.5 million people on what they think the best view is in the world. And whilst you might think they said Taj Mahal, a beautiful beach, the pyramids, no, they didn't. They all answered looking out of the windscreen of a 911 onto the 2 humps. And there you have it.